The weather is changing and a tide of gardening optimism has come in. Let us wrap our heads around fall vegetables to grow in Texas. I'll share my insights for planting guides, seed packets, and seasonal challenges for fall gardening in Central Texas. Hey, it's Scott from New Garden Road, always out here to inform, inspire, and elevate you. Encouraging biodiversity and restoring habitat is my mission, one garden at a time. But I do want to start off talking about warm season crops because although it's too late to plant these now, you may likely have them growing, fruiting, and doing really well in your fall garden. However, it's important to remember that these selections are generally frost tender. But the question is, when will our first frost occur? Here in Austin, it can range anywhere from late November to early January. The past couple of winters in particular, it has been a really late first freeze. Up until then, I can grow okra, long beans, a lot of my warm season greens, and basil. And you can also still hold on to things like peppers, eggplants, and tomatoes. Now, I mentioned those warm season crops for a key reason, and that's because in my garden, it seems more practical to carry through those selections until we really get to a point where the weather is a bit cooler. That being said, from September to early November, we have a lot of options for cool season plantings that we can try to grow. Now, timing is key, so you have to go for it and get some of these crops planted if you expect to harvest them by late fall. Regardless, many of our cool season options, they just don't like the heat, and their frost tolerance will vary as well. Many times that can be attributed to their maturity. Are they newly planted? Are they really young seedlings? Are they well established, have a good root system and some top growth? They may be a bit more hardened off to the season and better able to cope with cold temperatures. Some of the cool season crops that can be planted right now include a variety of Asian greens, as well as kale, collards. You can put in transplants of broccoli and other heading brassicas. And there are a lot of root crops that you can go for, such as beets, turnips, radishes, carrots, even rutabagas. As you make your selections, think about our growing window here and what we can get into as things become more severe, late December and early January. Look at the days to harvest for those crops. You can get an indication of this on the packet of seeds. It may say anywhere from 30 to 90 or 120 days for some crops. But the point that I want to make is if you choose those that are faster to produce, such as 30 to 40 days, then you're more likely to get them through and harvest in the fall season. If they take 70 to 90 days to mature, then it may push into early winter, and the weather conditions can just be a little bit dodgy for us about that time. Another strategy that you can employ is succession planting, or planting on a staggered schedule. You can go seeds, transplants, or a combination of both, and you can do that once a week, once every 2 weeks, something in that order, and this can help you to hedge your bets. Is the weather better at one point of planting than another? Soil temperatures can also play a role, specifically in germination. You may get a little bit better seed sprouting at one phase of planting than another, but if every single one of your plantings work out and there's no issues whatsoever, you're still going to have a staggered period of harvest, so you can keep some food coming in. Now, I've got a tool that I refer to a lot in my gardening practice here, specifically to vegetables, and that's for my planting area, specifically here in Central Texas, Zone 8B. I'm in Travis County. I plant by the Texas AgriLife Extension Service planting guide. Now, this is a planting guide, not planting law, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. Consider how you can experiment, what are the current weather trends, as well as how far are you willing to go in order to support either early or late season plantings, because that can take some more effort and you can get away with it oftentimes, so you can grow more food. But that's my perspective on this resource. You may have something similar in your area if you're not in Travis County, but look for that. It can give you a starting point and help you understand what you can be successful at. Now, if you look at this Travis County guide, there are some distinctions that I want to point out to you. And number one is it's when to plant from seed unless otherwise noted. In some cases, it'll say plant from seeds or transplants. It may just say from transplants or from crowns. Those are not from seed. If it doesn't say anything, then you can plant it from seed. And the reason that's important is because it will correspond to how long it takes for you to get them to harvest. There are other critical differences between planting from seed and transplants, and when we look at things like root crops, those are just going to be more successful. You're going to be better off planting them directly from seed. Whereas if I'm looking at something like kale, yes, I can plant seeds or transplants from kale right now. The difference being, if I plant from seed, it's going to take longer to get some kale in my kitchen than it would be if I planted from transplants. Transplants that you may pick up from a local nursery have been growing and developing for a period of 8 to 10 weeks already. So those can give you a head start. You can mix it up and do both, but it's very important to look at those details no matter what season you're in when you're looking at a chart like this. And also here for this guide, you can see the black bars. Those indicate when to plant. And a lot of them, it's tapered at one end or the other. And that's because it's allowing for some of the seasonal trends that I mentioned. You've got a little bit of leeway. You're either just getting into the planting zone or you're tapering off of it. Now I want to talk about seed packets and some of the information that you can find on them. Because if you live in Texas, this is a huge state. It requires some translation because in general, the information is not typically regionally specific. So you need to understand where you're at and look at that a little bit closer. But sometimes you'll see references to growing in mild winter climates or fall sowing. That's really important for you to make note of. And also if it distinguishes between starting seeds indoors versus outdoors, that can be a really critical detail because usually when it tells you to start them inside, like when we're going in the spring for tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, things like that, then it's really important for you to control their conditions. But a key piece of data that you really should hone in on is the average days to harvest. It may say it a little bit differently, but look for that number. Sometimes it just says 80 days or 90 days. I mentioned that this information is general, so it's really important to understand that a lot of times this refers to spring planting and growing, but there are some key differences when you're planting and growing through the fall. And those factors are that the daylight hours are decreasing as well as the temperatures are getting cooler, and this will correlate directly to slower growth and development of the crops that you're growing. So what I recommend is if you're documenting this, if you're planning ahead, add 7 to 10 days to the average days to harvest for your specific crop. And it might take a little bit longer than that. This is just a variable that you're going to encounter when you're growing through this time of year. I want to talk for a moment about heading brassicas like broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbages. I think it's important to know that if you're planting these in the fall, plant them from transplants or starts or seedlings. That way you're going to get a fall harvest as opposed to one in midwinter, because planting them from seed during this time of year can result in it taking 8 to 10 weeks longer. And that doesn't mean that you can't choose to start them from seed right now, or you could do both, right? You could do some succession planting. But if you do plant them now, you need to be prepared for winter weather and how you're going to get them through, because they'll likely require some protection going through any Arctic fronts. And many times, if you're growing broccoli or one of these heading brassicas, they may be starting to develop that head, that thing that you want. And if you get a really hard freeze at that point in time, it's not going to be good. But you can take steps to protect them and you can bring them through the season. I know I mentioned root crops earlier and the importance of planting them directly from seed, but I want to go a little bit deeper in that and just relay some of my experience going through the season. I can tell you about radishes, okay? A lot of times planting them late season as the days are much cooler, when the temperatures drop below 50 degrees for an extended period of time, this has proven to be disruptive in the growth and development of my radishes. Essentially, it stunted them as I grew them through December and January. But the key thing is I wasn't protecting them with any row cover during that time, because we often think about row cover as a way of protecting plants from frost or freezing conditions or ice or snow. But maybe we should employ them to extend the season when it's just colder in general. So 50 degrees or below for an extended period, I think can be a trigger for taking some measures. The same can go for beets, turnips, and carrots. They can just take longer. They can be slowed down through the season. Rutabagas, they can take a long time to develop, sometimes 90 to 120 days. I think they like a bit more uniform growing conditions and temperatures. When it goes from 80s to 20s like it does here in Central Texas, they just don't like that. If you're growing them in a high tunnel structure, a polytunnel, you're probably going to have a lot better control of that. But the backyard gardener doesn't typically enact those types of controls. And also carrots, if I may, just take forever. But at least carrots don't take a whole lot of space. I've got a video all about that if you want to check it out. But just know that they're not going to turn into monster champion carrots in 2 to 3 months. In my experience, it's gonna be 5 months. But you can do it, just offer them consistent moisture, protect them through any hard freezes. The cool thing is if you employ succession planting with things like carrots, then you're going to have a cascade of them from early March through late June. I've even harvested them in July. They start to get a little bit worse for the wear at that point, but that's a really great way to grow a lot of food over an extended period of time. What is the deal? What is the deal? Will you cut that racket down? Straighten up. Excuse me. One more plane. Turnips. Yeah. Rutabagas. Dang it. Now check out more awesome gardening videos on my channel. Like this video and follow New Garden Road for weekly content. You can grow your own food. Keep it organic.